Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to BookTrek 2024, the Summer of Trek. This is a summer-long BookTube event created by Vin at Revenant Reads and helmed with a crew of great other BookTubers, where we talk about Star Trek stuff all summer long. Now, I've let the ball down this summer. I've let a lot of time go by where I did not talk about Star Trek, even though I love to read it and love to talk about it. And then I just belatedly realized that the summer is almost over. Saturday and then Labor Day, and then we're done with the summer, believe it or not. Which I could talk about Star Trek anytime I want, but I like to do it under the aegis of a BookTube event. So I have been reading more Star Trek. I want to do a BookTrek video for the rest of August. And it feels right anyway, because as Vin has pointed out, and I think as a number of other co-hosts also feel, Star Trek feels like summer. Something about it does. I've been a Star Trek fan from the beginning. I was part of that letter writing campaign, the very first letter writing campaign. I was part of the second letter writing campaign. I went through the wilderness years where I really did not believe the rumors coming out of Hollywood that there was a movie in the works and that it was going to be a multi-million-dollar gamble. At the time, I had no one. I have a friend. Now, I have a web of friends who work in Hollywood. Now, I would not be surprised. Then I was. I didn't think that it would happen. So I gobbled up any kind of fiction that I could get, the dot matrix fan fiction that we all made and passed around, the earliest books. And despite that, despite all those years and all those experiences, the standout moments for me for Star Trek, for experiencing it and also loving it, have been in the summers. So Summer of Trek feels perfect to me. I don't quite have an explanation for why I have so badly dropped the ball, but I'm back. And I was wondering yesterday what Trek book I should add to my night's reading last night to talk to you about today. Something new, something that is maybe unpromising. There is a tiny handful of so-called new Trek fiction. There's a large amount of it online, a huge amount of it online. But there's a tiny amount of books. I have a feeling that the reason there aren't more new Trek books, there are currently 5 or 6 active Star Trek franchises. That's more than ever in the show's history. But I have a feeling that I know why there are so few books, and I think it's the same reason why there are no movies. And that's because New Trek is siloed away in a Lothlorien little bubble of its own, separate from audiences and separate from competition and separate from ratings, where it gets to say that it's the most popular thing in the world, and there are no metrics to prove it one way or another. The one or two instances where any show in New Trek, in so-called New Trek, Kurtzman Trek, the one or two instances where any show in New Trek has momentarily been put into a level playing field competitively, it has been crushed into composite atoms. Not just beaten a little by the hottest show in the world, but crushed to dust. And I think the studios realize that is the risk they run if they do any of this. If you make books about New Trek, no one will buy them because no one likes it. Because Star Trek fans, who are the only ones who have skin in the game, they're the only ones who will actually pay tickets to put butts in seats in a movie, don't want to be lectured about how in the 24th century, 81% of the adult population is lesbian. They don't want to be told that. They don't want to be lectured that if they don't like that, they're a horrible person. They don't want to be told that because old Trek wasn't like that, their grandparents were horrible people. They don't want any political signaling in Star Trek. They don't want any of it. And, okay, if you make a whole connected universe of New Trek that's in its own bubble so that you get to say what its ratings are and you don't have to prove it, where it never has to compete against anything, where, in other words, you don't need those fans, well, then you're never going to know what those fans think. You're never going to know how much they won't show up when you put your product in a neutral playing field. I think that's why there are no movies, and I'm pretty sure that's why there's no open non-cable competition for the shows, and I'm pretty sure that's why there are no books either. It's a shame, because I think some of the concepts for New Trek would work better as books than they do as shows where they can be ineptly acted and ineptly directed. A writer of a book adaptation of some concept of New Trek could get rid of some of the more annoying aspects of New Trek, like all of the secondary characters mugging for the camera, simply mugging for the camera, like the fact that New Trek has nothing to do with command structures. The command structure in New Trek is not the ranks of Starfleet, it's the rungs on the progressive stack. So if you are, I don't know, a whey-faced, expressionless, non-binary ensign on the bridge, and the captain of your ship, who's a cishet white man, tells you ahead 1/4 impulse power, you can say out loud in New Trek, "It seems like a dumb idea to me." And he'll just roll his eyes because you're protected. You outrank him. That's on the show. If you gave this concept to a writer probably would get rid of that. A writer that would take the job of writing this stuff as a novel would probably be a Star Trek fan, which is certainly 100% not true for any of the showrunners on New Trek. They're not only not fans of the show, they don't like it, and in most cases don't know anything about it. Whereas a writer of a book probably would. So you wouldn't get those kinds of little fill-ups that really annoy. You wouldn't get them. I think they'd probably be ironed out. And Star Trek Prodigy would make a fantastic novel. The first episode, the epic first episode of Star Trek Prodigy, the thing that launches the whole franchise, would make a great novel. Star Trek Discovery, rightly called by those neck-bearded fascists STD, is unsalvageable. It cannot be made into anything good. Even the negatives should be burned, and a book would... It's not salvageable. There's no way to fix it. You cannot retcon that Mr. Spock had a smarter, better in every way older sister who was black and was human and had a boy's name. You cannot do that. Bad enough that you give that in a Star Trek movie you give Spock a fully Vulcan half-brother. But the Twitter stuff, the Twitter avatar of the take charge girl boss who don't need no man is actually Spock's older, smarter, more Vulcan sister? No. That has to just be gone. You have to just retcon that out of existence. But the rest of it, the rest, I mean, the showrunners on Star Trek Discovery, I think on some level did realize that they would have to just retcon all of this out of existence, send the ship 1,000,000 years into the future and have everyone forbidden to talk about it. So that we'll agree this never happened. that what happens in the lesbian hotel in L.A. stays in the lesbian hotel in L.A. But all the rest of it, Lower Decks, if you could find a science fiction writer who can do comedy, very hard to do comedy in prose. But if you could find that, Lower Decks would make a wonderful series of lighthearted novels with a serious plot twist at the end of every one of them. I could practically do it myself. Star Trek Prodigy, either at the beginning, either someone writing up that first episode or someone writing the later developments in which a good deal of Star Trek lore is pulled in, those would be good novels. Even Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I say even because Star Trek Strange New Worlds is flying under false colors. It is lying to its fans, which you would think would damn it complete me in my eyes, because, as I have to remind the 21st century, lying is bad. It's lying to its fans because it's telling those fans, the new Trek showrunners are saying, that this is set in normal continuity, in the Roddenberry continuity. This is not the Kelvin timeline, or any other timeline. This is ordinary Roddenberry continuity, and that is obviously not true. In every single little detail of the show and in all the major details, that is obviously not true. The Enterprise did not first meet all of the alien races that Captain Kirk meets for the first time in the original series. Vulcans do not kiss. Lieutenant Kyle is not a 12-year-old twink. And so on and so forth down. Christine Chapel is not a member of the Enterprise before Kirk gets there. She is not ninja plus level in unarmed combat. It's on and on and on. Just on and on and on. The Star Trek Strange New Worlds is not at all Roddenberry continuity. I think that it is meant, and in a couple of years, if it keeps going, will be revealed to be a rewrite of Roddenberry continuity. So it won't be that it's an alternate timeline. It will be that the Roddenberry continuity doesn't exist anymore. I think that's what will happen. I could be wrong about that, but the reason why I'm not just dismissing it out of hand, even though it is lying to its fans, is that it's so good. It's so enjoyable. I mean, it's so enjoyable. It is the single most beautiful television show I've ever seen, just from a production quality. But also, the cast, with one or two minor exceptions, they're not only obviously enjoying themselves, which is pretty infectious, and certainly not true in Star Trek Discovery, but also they're fantastic together. I defy you not to eagerly watch an episode of Strange New Worlds. So that's the reason for the but. That's the reason for the exclusion here, is that even Strange New Worlds, I think, would make good novels. I've read one, and it wasn't good. But it could. It could. This stuff could be. It's just not going to be, because if you make a novel out of Star Trek Discovery, which you would have to do, you wouldn't have any say in the matter. If you were going to make a regular thing out of New Trek novels, and you didn't make regular Star Trek Discovery novels, then whoever is in charge of the print editions, the print wing of that whole enterprise, would be called names on Twitter by 12 psychos, and they'd lose their job, any job, even bagging groceries. They would die if they did that. So, and for some reason, that is still true. For some reason, these blue-haired psychos who are pushing the progressive stack have unlimited social power. They have no political power, but they have unlimited social power. They control Hollywood, they control academia, and those are two big parts of our society. So if they know that you're greenlighting a line of Star Trek New Trek novels, and you don't have any Star Trek Discovery novels planned, they'll call you a homophobe. They'll call you a racist. They'll call your grandparents and tell them through their earphones that grandson is a racist. I'll call them every day and tell them that. It's that whole morass of competition-hating, fan-hating Twitter insanity that I think is a big part of the reason why there aren't any books. So I could explore. I could, for the rest of BookTrek, I could. You thought I forgot about BookTrek, didn't you? I could explore for the rest of BookTrek. I could read lots and lots of stuff like that. I could even do what a lot of you have asked me to do over the course of this summer, which is give a field report on some of that fan fiction from places like fanfiction.net. A lot of you know that I spend a lot of time on those sites. I love them. I read them. And a lot of you don't. There's so much there that you don't have the time to do it. I don't blame you at all. Over this summer and also last BookTrek, a lot of people have asked, could you dip into that world and maybe tell us a little about it? Especially if you find something that is worth reading. I've had a couple of people, including one viewer of this channel last year. Oh, no, it was the year before, yeah. The year before last. She said, I'm as old as dirt, and I spend almost no time online. But if you find a good ongoing series about Star Trek on one of these sites, I'll sign up in order to read it. I'm sure she's not alone. I could do that, but instead, last night I decided to go to an old favorite. I decided to go to this. Wagon Train to the Stars from 20 years ago, 25, 24 years ago. This came out, I think, in 2000. This is volume 1 of a 6-part series. Volume 1 is called New Earth, with this great original cover there. This is original Star Trek, and this is written by Diane Carey, who also came up with the idea for the whole thing. She doesn't write every novel of those 6, but she came up with the whole idea. And the idea is wonderful. It's the thing that I've often called for in BookTrek videos, which is, could I have more realistic portrayals of the older bridge crew of the original Enterprise? In the original series of Star Trek, we watch our characters get older. We follow them through their lives. That's incredibly rare when it comes to fictional IPs. That at least when Star Trek started it was incredibly rare to do. It leaves a huge amount of untapped potential for stories to tell about these people. Realistically, not just them acting like themselves, even though they're all 60, they're acting like they when they were 30, but how people change. What the changes do to them. Diane Carey is my favorite Star Trek author. She is incredibly sensitive to the original series characters. I get the impression, I don't know for sure, I don't know her, but I get the impression of just endless hours scrupulously watching VHS tapes, pausing every minute to get a little detail here and there. But here it's not necessary for those original VHS tapes, because here our concentration is not VHS but V'ger. This takes place after Kirk and crew have saved the whole world from V'ger. So, well after, I think. So these characters are older. They are seasoned. And in this story, the whole of the New Earth story, they are given the task of shepherding and or guarding and guiding 60,000 colonists to a faraway world. A world those colonists want to settle without the backdrop of the Federation, without the safety net, without the starships and cutters coming and going out of the system. They are far, far away from everything. They are pioneers. Hence the title of book number 1, Wagon Train to the Stars, which is meant to evoke that kind of pioneer spirit, and also a knowing wink on Diane Carey's part to how, in Gene Roddenberry's day, the original Star Trek was often, sometimes disdainfully, referred to as Wagon Train to the Stars. Wagon Train, for you young'uns, being the name of an incredibly successful TV series of westerns at the time. Kirk and his crew agreed to do it. It's a hugely prestigious thing, could be dangerous. It's also the definition of seek out new life and new civilization, to boldly go where no one has gone before. It's the definition of that. So they agree. They are the only starship. There are a couple of other armed vessels, but it's mostly civilian vessels. Lots of them. There are huge cryogenic warehouse ships that will have all sorts of wildlife and seedlings that are needed on this new world. There are all sorts of equipment vessels and whatnot, med vessels. And the key here, the key to realize for the tensions, is that every one of these vessels has a captain who is used to being the law of the land. None of them are Starfleet. So they are told by Starfleet, by Federation authorities, well, you're not part of the Federation, you're certainly not part of Starfleet, but we're sending the Enterprise onto Captain Kirk. So he's in charge until you get where you're going. Obviously, we're not going to have you herring off to fight Romulans. He's in charge until you get where you're going. We don't. The last thing we want to experience in the news feeds is that your unarmed colony expedition was carved apart by Klingons. So we're sending the Enterprise onto Captain Kirk. So you have to defer to him until you get where you're going. Naturally, that causes tension. That wouldn't cause tension if Kirk were a fleet admiral, because all those people are trained in the chain of command. But these captains are not. They're all used to being kings in their own domain. And on top of that, one of the people on this expedition is a criminal who changed his name to get on the expedition and who Kirk thought was in jail. And now he's out here where nothing can be done about him. You know, it's like Janeway says in Voyager in one episode, I don't have the luxury of throwing you in the brig. I need everyone. So you can't just be a prisoner. You will be their problem when you get to their colony, but I can't do anything about you here except keep an eye on you. And Kirk's crew, his signature bridge crew, they are drawing on decades and decades of experience to shepherd this fleet of colonists and to solve all of their problems. McCoy is in charge of medicine for the entire fleet. He overrides all the doctors. Scotty, of course, is in charge of engineering for the whole of the fleet and all the nightmares that it involves, including early on in this book, a harrowing scene where a drone ship attacks a gigantic warehouse ship with people on board. And nothing seems to be able to stop it. Kirk has to stop it manually. So in a great scene where he just orders another captain to come with him. And I'm going to need 2 sets of hands to do this. The other captain actually grouses to him. It's been a long time since anyone said no to you, isn't it? This is, in other words, not the Wildwood Scout, as Diane Carey calls him in another book. This is not the Wildwood Scout Captain Kirk. This is a seasoned legend, and so are all of his bridge crew. They are legends, all of them, in their own right. And they're all here to take part in this incredible endeavor. And it's amazingly good. This novel is amazingly good. You would think, well, how enjoyable can it be if it's only book 1 out of 6? But, oh my, is it good. There are so many set pieces in here that I would like to read you in full. There's a whole set piece where the nervous future governor of this colony he's always on the bridge. He's always fretting about something. He might as well have civilian tattooed on his forehead. And there's one scene where he is fretting on the bridge when a minor catastrophe happens in the fleet, and Kirk and his crew are solving it while this guy is ranting. They're so experienced with each other that they don't even need to put their heads together to solve it. A look here, a glance there can just get it all done so that this guy doesn't even know it. And they encounter all sorts of problems. It's not only problems with the ships, it's also that the area they're entering is the battlefield of 2 alien species who know who these new people are and don't really care. It's not a safe galaxy out there. As Kirk tries to tell his civilian charges, and they sometimes listen to him, they sometimes don't, but it's mostly friction. Throughout the book, it's mostly friction. Most of the captains of these vessels are freewheeling lords of their own domain. They don't want someone telling them what to do. Especially Starfleet, they all distrust the military. And there are some wonderful, wonderful bits. If you will indulge me, I will read you just a couple of bits because they are they are just amazing. Like, for instance, there's a scene halfway through the book when the most adamant critic of Captain Kirk sees the light. He can't be told to see the light. He can't be urged by anybody. He can't be told by any of Kirk's crew, look, you're reading this guy all wrong. He's got to see it. These are can-do, hands-on folk. They've got to see it. And this captain does. Sylvie Graves jumped high enough to plant a kiss on Kilvennan's cheek before rushing to disengage the holding thrusters and flush the propulsion system with power. Impulse drive ready. Quarters, general quarters, all hands. The Hunter's moon thrummed to life around them, all the lights going to alert Scarlet. In the aft decks, they heard the pummel of feet hitting the decks and the voices of startled crewmates barking for action. The engines hummed, the helm lit up. Troy, take the helm. Forward thrusters, midship. After raising the alarm, Augustine came back bright-eyed and flushed. Midship? What changed your mind, Michael? Kilvennan drew a deep breath, probably his last, and looked at the center screen. There, the Enterprise stubbornly held the Conestoga together using tractor beams, thrust, hope, and the brazen tenacity of her captain. And then he answers, What changed your mind about helping out? He answers, he did. He's not letting them down. I figure someday he won't let me down either. You can live forever looking for a captain who'll fight for your life like that. Well, yes, Star Trek fans are nodding. They're saying, yeah, that's Jim Kirk. Thanks for finally noticing. But we see another side of Kirk as well as the action heats up, because we are reminded only a couple of times in this book. These are freighters, there are a couple of cutters, there are these ragtag alien species, of course. Where there are aliens fighting, there are also Orion saboteurs and profiteers looking to scoop in and make trouble and make some extra profit. And we get all that, and we get all these bigger and smaller characters, and the one detail that Diane Carey often lets us forget, she's in complete control, but she lets us forget that in the middle of all of this is a Constitution-class starship. A starship that can destroy the surface of a planet in an hour. A starship that, yes, has met its share of challenges and whatnot and can be sabotaged from within, but that is an incredible super fortress of a device on its own, under the command of its most legendary captain, whose instincts for faking out his enemies and winning when he shouldn't are legendary. There's a scene here where we get that just a bit, where suddenly the Enterprise appears where it should not. How'd he get over there? Troy rasped from the deck. He was coming from the other direction. Kirk decoyed them with a shuttle cluster. In tight formation, the shuttles read as a single vehicle, while Enterprise did an end run around them at higher warp. Pretty good. The Orions thought they were turning to face the starship and ended up putting their weakest shields and thrust assemblies square in his sights. Nice move. He completely faked them out. They fell to silence, watching in disbelief as the starship cut into the remaining two Orions. Mercilessly, it cut the hull apart on the next closest slaver until the Orion attempted to veer off and instead blew itself into a sparkle. Notice there's no hailing. There's no Jean-Luc Picard style asking for surrender. Unceremoniously, the Enterprise turned on the third remaining Orion, while in the background the first two, who had netted one ship, raced out of the area, abandoning their last compatriots to the starship's unsympathetic treatment. Michael slid to his knees beside Troy, while Sylvie, shuddering over, joined them. Did it, he murmured. He did it. They watched in numb relief as the Enterprise bore down like a rogue elephant on the single suffering Orion plunderer and simply chewed it to pieces. The sight seemed brutal and gave Michael Kilvennan a sense of viciousness in James Kirk that legend had somehow cleaned up with time. He thought of the family as he watched the last Orion ship being cut up by the starship's unbroken phaser stream. He thought of his wife and his little kids, his sister, parents, and gentle-hearted brother Quinn dragged off to some incalculable distance and put in chains for the rest of their lives. He watched those phasers and was gladdened. And that's all this book is just getting there. There's a whole lot still to happen. Many other books. But I had to reread this last night. To me, it feels a little bit like a disappointment to reread old favorites for BookTrek. But I have to remember, There are lots of people watching this that didn't watch me last year. There are lots of people that didn't know my channel existed last year. You might not know about this. You might not know how much I love it. I said yesterday, in yesterday's BookTrek video, I said that I would try to resist the urge for the waning days of BookTrek 2024 to simply reread my favorite Star Trek book. I said that I would try to resist the urge to do that. Of course, I got bombarded with emails saying, oh, we know which book that is, and people saying, please, please do it again. Talk about it again. So maybe I'll do that, but not tonight. Tonight I'm going to add another book. Maybe it'll be another favorite, or maybe it'll be another old Trek book that I haven't reread in a long time. There are some of those. But this was a huge amount of fun to revisit, as it always is. As it always is. This is exactly... When I talk about... I read some Trek novel in which, like the last one that I read, where the crew is older. They are legendary. They have saved the universe. They've saved Earth many times. They know each other through life and death. If you're going to write about that crew, I should feel that. That should all be present. And it so seldom is. And when I say that, when I make that kind of a complaint about a Star Trek book about the older crew, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is exactly it. And oh boy, I know it's weird for me to say because I started out BookTrek not liking The Next Generation. It was the only Star Trek franchise of the old show that I didn't like. Now I love it. I've seen the light. Mainly thanks to BookTrek and all the dedicated Next Gen fans who've been talking me around on it. And now, more than any other book, I started out this video with a huge peroration about Star Trek books. Oh my God. I would love to write the novel version of Season 3 of Star Trek Picard. I would love to write that. OMG, would I love to do that. And I wouldn't mind if a whole bunch of other Star Trek authors also did. Somebody should get the contract to do that. I know it might be dodgy that Star Trek fans would buy anything connected with New Trek in book form, but they would certainly buy The Next Generation in book form, especially if it were big, do it really well, give it great end papers in the hardcover, maybe a fold-out map. Why not? Why not? Give it a smaller print run and make it a beautiful thing and get a really good writer to do it. You would recoup your expenses for that book. To put it mildly, you would recoup your expenses. I bet it'd go into 10 editions. Anyway, it's a subject for another video. But anyway, that's our BookTrek for today. I will be back tomorrow, who knows with what, but I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTrek.